May 26th. We're here today for a webinar entitled Learning Communities, a Catalyst for Resilient Students and Inclusive Assessment Practices. And this is a really hot topic for business educators. We have two outstanding presenters here today that we are happy to introduce to you. Let me start by introducing Lynn Marie Burks, PhD. Lynn's an award-winning progressive executive director at the Jacobson Institute. And she's also, more importantly almost, is the president of Yorkville 115 Board of Education and board of directors at the American Association of University Administrators, with a proven history of success in devising strategies that facilitate systemic transformation in organizations. With over 25 years of industry insight, Lynn has contributed to business value by utilizing her background in economics and providing an understanding of financial trends to further company visions and objectives. Both a compassionate leader and a trusted collaborator, she's mobilized teams, negotiated effectively with external parties, and empowered individuals through coaching and mentorship. Steady hand in the boardroom, she has offered an objective perspective, provided constructive challenges, and ensured accountability to improve overall business efficiency. So we have a really great guest here today. Lynn, nice to meet you, and thanks for being here. In addition, we have Dr. Wendy Finley. She serves as the Dean for the School of Business at Plaza College in Forest Hill, New York. She is responsible for student retention and career readiness for adult learners. Finley's passion is classroom engagement and ensuring that students from all backgrounds have a chance to compete in the job market. Her experience in higher education includes serving as lead faculty and faculty chair of the graduate business programs at Keller Graduate School of Management. And over the years that she's received a number of different awards and recognition for teaching excellence and student engagement and retention. She was involved in faculty training in both online and on-site modality for introducing new technologies needed in creating vibrant learning communities. Prior to a career in higher education, Finley was an entrepreneur in the international freight and logistics industry. She also serves as a consultant for small businesses, and she holds a number of different degrees. And she's an avid supporter of healthy living and work-life balance, and she enjoys walking and daily exercise, not only of the body, but of the mind and the spirit as well. Dr. Finley, thank you for joining us today. And I'll turn it over to both of you for what we're sure is to be a great time today.
Well, thank you so much, Joe. Thank you all. We really appreciate having this conversation with you. And we do want to make this is a conversation. And so we want, interject, we want you to be part of this really, really important discussion. And so we're gonna keep it simple, but hopefully you'll leave here today with also some helpful strategies, either for your teams or your classrooms, really talking about the power of learning communities in post-COVID and the point we are right now in education, just how important it is to be able to create these learning communities. I mean, how do you create a learning community? Learning communities are prevalent in professional organizations and, but they don't always make their way into college classrooms or better yet, K-12 classrooms. What does technology play into this? And we're going to talk a little bit about, we're at a point now where technology really can enhance the impact that these communities of practice have on our students and our institutions. And lastly, the additional benefits of a community inclusive approach for teaching, learning, and assessment. So really quick here, and we're going to deep dive into these issues, but what is a benefit of a community of practice? So again, if you've ever heard the term community of practice, it is if you're part of a professional organization, it's really a group of members that come together for a common purpose. So why can't we take that premise and that theory and really bring it into our classrooms, bring it into all of your classrooms? And what are those benefits? Today more than ever, the focus on resilience, needing to really help students be resilient and wellness, how important wellness is to a learning community. Inclusive. Everybody wants to be able to come to the community. Everyone is included in that community. How a community fosters, the value of the community, and how it creates a sense of purpose and a sense of mattering, that every member of that community matters. And lastly, it's authentic. It's driven by the learners. It's driven by the community. And Dr. Finley and I both want to share some reflections of you as probably some of the best learning that we've seen, and how you can see students actually learn and grow and evolve just from being able to create these communities. So I'm going to hand this over to my colleague, Dr. Finley. So Dr. Finley.
Thank you so much, Dr. Burks. Oh, it is such a pleasure to be here this evening to share with you one of the topics that is really near and dear to my heart, learning communities. You know, we have gone from physical classrooms, and I'm sure everyone on this call has experienced having to turn our on-site classrooms into virtual classrooms. And there isn't a time more important than now that we understand the importance and the power of learning communities. So what do we mean by learning communities? We're talking about a safe space, non-judgmental, freedom to express ideas across multi-generational, multicultural, and other social economic differences that we find with our students. So they come together for a common agenda. And what is that agenda? They all come because they want to learn. They're trying to go back to school to get a higher degree. They want to achieve something. So they come with this common agenda. And it's up to us as educators to create that community, that culture where learning can be a vibrant way of spending your time in the classroom. And most importantly, it fosters growth. So how do we create this? Sounds great, but how do you actually create that, especially in an online format? Well, there are community norms, right? There are rules of engagement. And one of the things that I know that I like to do right from the first day of class is to kind of set the tone, kind of create that culture. And it's so important to reward and acknowledge good behavior right from the beginning, because as we'll talk later on, we know that students imitate others, right? They learn from others. So if you don't address certain behaviors at the beginning, that's what the whole entire semester is going to be about. So recognizing and showing what good community rules of engagement are, respect, how to raise your hand to speak, and so forth. So common goals of, values and respect. We can't have an educational discussion without talking about the social learning theory, right? And we know that students learn from others. They learn through observation. And, if you acknowledge those good behaviors right away, that's going to be the culture that you create in the classroom. So I really like the fact that during COVID, we can have an online environment where students can feel that they're valued and respected in the classroom. So, I would say it's important to not just create this learning environment, but how do we keep it thriving and keep it inclusive where everyone can feel like they matter? So let me ask my colleague, Dr. Burks, to explain what is a thriving and inclusive community? Maybe you can dig a little deeper for us.
And, Dr. Finley, I just want to add a little bit too. Communities can be informal. Learning is social.
Yes.
It is, you cannot take that out of the process. And so when you think about this, this doesn't have to be complex. Dr. Finley talked about creating, maybe these, mimicking the behavior. So as faculty and teachers, I think we have to be so formal. I think about how you can create these communities of practice that could be more social, a little bit informal. I'll never forget, this is way, way, way back. I had a business class and I just could not get these students to interact with each other. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't get them to talk. I'm trying to put them in groups. I'm trying to do all sorts of active learning strategies. And, they're just falling asleep. I'm like, all right, guess what? We're all getting in our cars. We're going over to Starbucks. So we all went over to Starbucks. And I am telling you, from that point forward, that probably is one of my best business classes that I've ever met. It broke down the barriers. It created a safe space. We created some norms. We started to respect each other. We not only talked about the social aspects of what people needed, but then we also wove in the academic piece as well. So these are little things that you can do. And when you talk about sustaining a community, and Dr. Finley, I'm interested in your thoughts on this as well. Every class, you should have some opportunity where you're allowing your students to engage with each other.
Absolutely.
Wherever and however, and you can be as creative and informal as you want, because what happens is they start bonding immediately. And you create this community and they start caring for each other. And they're like, where's Joe? Oh no, how come Joe's not here today? Where's Sally? Where's Ted? And they all of a sudden, very quickly, they start valuing each other, respecting each other, and caring for each other. So, that if you think about, how do you kind of create this, just think of little ways, little informal ways as well, that you can take some strategies and just really get them to connect with each other, because that is really a powerful connection. So, so again, a space where individuals' contributions can be shared, that, they feel safe. And so you do, as a faculty member or a teacher, your presence is really important. And so you do have to set that tone right away. And then, really continue to guide them, to let them know that they matter. Hey, Joe, you turned in a great assignment this week. Can you share with the rest of the class what this was all about? So if they don't start sharing on their own, which they will, but if they don't, there are little things you can do to kind of bring them in so they start feeling safe about that. And again, use the community to celebrate things, use the community to share challenges. And what happens, think about this last piece that I think is just so powerful. As they start to share their experiences, this becomes so essential and critical for a learner. And they start finding their potential place. And as they move through their learning journey, they ultimately start really thinking about who they are, what they're supposed to be doing. And it really leads to successful personal and professional goals. Wouldn't you agree, Dr. Finley?
Oh, absolutely. And, once interaction starts to take place, students will realize that even some of the challenges that they're facing, other people are facing the same things. And that kind of makes them feel a little bit more relaxed and say, oh, wait a minute, I'm not the only one facing all these different challenges, the social unrest, all these different things that's going on around us. So what I usually do in my classes, for the first few minutes of my class, I kind of have a little chit chat, what's going on? And most importantly, for the subjects that I teach, I would say, what has happened in the world today that connects to what we learned in class last week? So connecting them to that real world, the material you're teaching. And so all of a sudden that learning is taking place and they're able to connect with the material and also with each other. So they have a feeling, that belonging, that we're all sharing the same information at the same time. So it is very, very important to do that, for sure.
And through that comes, once you kind of set this tone, you start building empathy. It is probably one of the most transformative processes that I've seen when, through communities of practice, is how much empathy they start having for each other and how authentic the learning becomes. And, those of you that, that teach online, you're probably familiar with these discussion boards, right? And they're very, they're really very tactical and prescriptive. And, it's like you don't have a lot of, they kind of come and they post and they go. You don't see a lot of interaction going on. And so when a true thriving inclusive community is very authentic, they're bringing things to the community, and through that comes incredible deep learning that they're driving on their own. And we'll talk about this a little. There are subjects that are very complex, and you find them bringing these complex issues to the community, and you see incredible understanding and empathy that is created by them bringing these things to the community on their own. They're driving their learning, and they become empowered, and they start teaching each other as well. And that's an incredible transformation.
That is so true. When students feel that they are heard and that they have something to contribute, that is what turns them on to the learning process. And as professors, teachers, we want to see that. We want them to feel that, oh, they matter and they have something to contribute. Everyone has something to contribute in this learning community. So I have a question that I want to ask, and to kind of stir up the pot a little bit. I like to do that. So I love your story about getting in the car and taking them to Starbucks, which is great in the physical world, right? What do we do online? We can't do that, right? So I want to ask a question, and I hope we'll get some answers. Which is easier, to create this learning community online, or is it easier face-to-face? What do you think? I would love to know what you guys think. Which is easier, online to create this community, or is it a face-to-face? Which one do you think? Can we get it in the chat? I don't know if we can see some responses in the chat. Face-to-face? Ooh, you guys, oh my goodness. You might not like me after this one, because I want to stir the pot up a little bit. Well, I kind of knew that you would say that. Oh, someone is going to agree with me. Yes. Oh, okay. I see someone else saying that online. Let me say this. I have been teaching online for many, many years, even before COVID. And so it is something that with experience, you learn how to do this kind of almost seamless, right? Those of you who have lots of experience teaching face-to-face, this is something that you do and you're great at it. But can I tell you that in an online environment, I have found that it is a lot easier to create this online. For one, I'm sure face-to-face, you had to put like name cards, and you put down the names of the students so you can call on them so they can feel like they matter. Well, we don't have to do that in the online. Their names come up on the screen, just like right now I see names coming up on the screen. I can call you by your name. If you have your cameras on, I can recognize you by who you are. So I would say online is a lot easier. In the physical classroom, you probably have some students who sit way in the back and they hide behind someone so you don't call on them. You don't have that on the online format. You can see everyone has a front stage presence. And I know here at our school at Plaza College, we, for online classes, we enforce you've got to put your camera on. And that's a way of making sure that we know students. I tell them, if I see you on the street, I should be able to recognize you. So Okay, walk around the classroom. Yes, in a physical classroom, you can do that. And you can do that in the online format as well. Just go around and acknowledge each person. So I do think it is a lot easier to set up online communities with the technology that we have. And I know we're going to talk a little bit more about how important the role of technology is, especially in trying to create this kind of a learning community.
Yeah, and I mean, they're both important. I mean, when you have students, but you don't, sometimes if you're lucky enough to have small classes, you can see if your students are engaging and you can, have some really active learning strategies. But, if you're in some of these very large courses, it's very hard to see, are your students really engaging or not? And have they really connected with their peers? Which is incredibly powerful. So we're just gonna also kind of put out there that both Dr. Finley and I really, as we were putting this together, technology really is the equalizer. When you think about, even if you're in a class, the faculty member or the teacher is always at the front of the class. I mean, some of them are on this podium. That's a hierarchy, right?
Mhm.
I'm going to call on you. I'm up here and you're down here. They may even some of the lecture halls, right? They're not, look how they're set up. They're not engaging. They're very, and they go up. And so there's physical power structures there. And so as you use technology, and you actually can use technology in a classroom too. I mean, I would try to go, I would go into my classes and sometimes I'd create little tables and then I put 4 or 5 chairs around a table. I would never, ever have my students in rows. So think about that. But think about ways you can eliminate power structures. But if you do in online communities, those power structures aren't there. And you really are opening the door for ownership, empowering them, and really, and really actually just ensuring that they're really driving their learning. And like Dr. Finley talked about too, technology has advanced so much that you have the video cameras now, you have names, we're people. Online learning long ago, you didn't even know who existed. You had like the phantom faculty member and the phantom student. And now you can see people's faces. You can something as simple as having a picture of somebody. You have an emotional connection to them and it changes how you interact with them. And it changes just that you humanize the educational process.
I was just going to add, I see someone put that in the chat about, you mentioned about large classes, but with the technology, with breakout rooms, we can put them in small discussion groups. And that's actually one of the things that I know students say they love, to be in small group discussions. And then they come back to the main room and they share what they've learned. And that is empowering, as you were saying, shifting that power from teacher to students and allowing them to present and to feel that they're in charge of their learning. And I think that is a powerful thing.
Yeah, and there are all sorts of strategies you could be in class and create kind of online communities. You can do little Kahoot quizzes, or you can do word clouds, or you can, they're interacting. And
yes.
Very few students will raise their hand and interact, especially if they're in a large class, especially if you're in a highly technical class where you don't have a lot of confidence. Mm-hmm. And it's been both Dr. Finley's and I experience that, when you have these communities where you've eliminated these barriers and these power structures, students start realizing that everybody has challenges. Mm-hmm. Everybody actually didn't understand the lecture, and they start realizing that they're not by themselves, that they're not alone, that they're not isolated, and they open themselves up, because vulnerable students will hide. Vulnerable students will hide. And so we're going to challenge you today to think about how you take some of those vulnerable students, how you bring them into these learning communities. And so this isn't a commercial or anything, but, Yellowdig is one of those technology platforms that does allow students to really interact in a very authentic way where they're really driving their own learning. They're bringing things to the community that is of interest to them within the context of the course. And it's a way to really leverage it. There's intuitiveness there, there's analytics, there's bells and whistles. It takes all of those important elements of a community and it digitizes those things in a very fun, engaging, yet highly rigorous educational environment. Sorry, got on the brain.
Economics,
by the way.
Well, I think you're so right about that, taking control of their learning. And when we think about the learning cycle of how do students really learn when they take in information and they're able to connect that to the real world, they're able to share that information, that helps them to grow, that helps them to retain information. And that's really, really what learning is all about. And it's non-judgmental. That's the key part. You're talking about those shy students or students who feel like they don't really have much to contribute. You really want them to feel that they're part of the community.
Yeah, and there's a couple other things we want to just kind of talk about, have a conversation with you about, and then we want to open it up and have a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But authentic learning and assessment. Just through all of my experience with fostering student community and communities of practice, I have seen firsthand how authentic the learning really is. And a lot of it is because they're driving it. And obviously we guide them. We're still navigating the ship, but they're really owning that. And so they've had a vested interest in that. And that becomes extremely authentic. It's not like they're just regurgitating or worse off cut and pasting an answer for you, right? These are true, authentic learning that's happening right in front of your eyes.
Awesome. And when we think about inclusiveness and the ability to connect all types of learners, and we know as educators that there are different types of learners. You've got those who are, they hear and they learn, or they see and they learn, or they read something, or maybe they learn by doing. There's so many different ways that they learn. And with this new technology that we're talking about, it allows for that. There's something there for everyone. And no matter what style of learner you are, you will be able to be a part of this community and not feel that, oh, I'm different. We want people to feel that they are a part of the community and they have the same rights, the same abilities as everyone in the community, even if their learning style is different. So that is a really important point to make.
I have an example. So I teach economics, and I'll never forget one of my students, because students are they're always a step ahead of you, and when you give them the right tools and you make them comfortable, it's amazing kind of how brave they are and what they do. They're starting to run the class. They're like, hey, are we in a recession? Are we not in a recession? I'm like, well, I was going to ask that question, but I guess they're going to ask that question. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting how they start leveraging the tools as well that really drive it, and they're guiding their peers as well. And that's what we want, right? That's a faculty member or teacher's dream.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So last, we want to share some reflections that we've had too, because we've talked about resilience, and all of us share this together. We've all seen students really through this period of trauma, through COVID and all the, all the everything going on in this world. A lot of our students really did have firsthand trauma.
Mhm.
And what one of the things that was just amazing to see was, even as they were working through their challenges over the last several years, how they were coming to the community and sharing their challenges, and how the community was helping them through those challenges. And yes, they'll do it, so we're talking about the learning and how maybe they're not sure they understand something, but wellness and student wellness and social emotional health is so important. They were actually coming to the community as well, going through incredible trauma, and I could see firsthand how the community was really helping students through probably one of their most challenging times, at least in college, and what our college students were, and what all of our students were experiencing. Dr. Finley, I don't know if you want to share some firsthand knowledge as well, but I am a firm believer that there's incredible resilience. Student resilience is built through the power of communities.
Absolutely. You could not have said it any better. And, even if I could just take us even before COVID, our students were challenged with, all kinds of things, especially if you are teaching, or you're in charge of a population where they're underserved already. Maybe they have, economic struggles, so those students, in addition to COVID now, are like double traumatized, right? With things such as, family members with COVID, children with COVID, all those things, isolation. Some people are feeling isolated, and with so much talk of what's going on with, social unrest. So when you're able to be in a community where you have that common goal, and you are seeing that others are triumphing over these trauma, it makes you feel, wow, I want to continue. I look forward to going to class, even though I'm having these challenges. And these are not just made up stories. These are real life experiences that we've gone through. And we could give you countless stories of students who, it's a getaway to get to this community, and they beg us for it. They're like, oh, when are we going to do this learning community again? Because they feel that it is something that they look forward to, in addition to it's very interactive. So I don't know if it just takes their mind off their problems for a moment too, sometimes, but they're able to share their experiences with colleagues, and it really makes a difference in the learning process.
Yeah. So why don't we, Joe and Dr. Finley and Daniel, I can stop sharing my screen now, and maybe we can just go on camera, and then we can just have a nice discussion, see if anyone has anything else to add. Because we really do want to have a conversation, and you taking some of these pieces and maybe sharing them with your teams, or sharing, or maybe even implementing them in your class.
All right, well, thank you for that great presentation. Let's go to questions right now. If you want to, Daniel will be watching the chat if you have questions there. But anybody who would like to chime in and talk about this issue further, or ask any of our distinguished panelists any information or any questions about your classroom, how you're doing some of these things in your classroom, or questions about that, we would love to offer you that opportunity now. So take a few moments to do that. Sure, Deborah, go ahead.
I teach high school, mostly juniors and seniors, economics and business, and I'm finding that the topic of this conversation was resilience, or resistance, I think. What do you do with students who, after 2 years of COVID, are just burned out, and almost like, let's just get this over with. Just very resistant to doing things according to a schedule. They've been so used to doing things according to their own schedule. Any techniques?
Well, I think we're all fatigued with this COVID and we want it to be gone. So when it's important to connect with the students and let them know that they're not alone with that thought that, yeah, we're all zoomed out. We're tired of it all. And once we come to that understanding, and I do find that even with my students at the college level, yeah, they're tired of this. They're tired of the discussions about vaccines and all the restrictions. So once if you provide a safe space to vent that, then perhaps once they realize that they're not alone, they can move on with the process of learning. So it is, it is a very trying time for everyone, and they need to know that they're not alone in that. And other students may be able to even share, you know what, well, I didn't really feel like coming to class today because I'm really sick and tired of all of this, but this is what I did. And using the community to not feeling that as the professor, or teacher, you have to have all the answers, because we don't have all the answers. And it's the power of the community that I think will help the other students to get through this trying time. I'm not
Deborah,
sure
are you online mainly, or are you on site?
We are now on site.
You're on site,
We have been all year.
Think about maybe something to, and maybe some sort of experiential, maybe some sort of field experience or something that we're all burnt out. And so maybe, having an experiential, as, a field trip or a guest speaker or something like that, that just really is something really different, but give them time to socialize and kind of think about something else. And it might start bringing them back in.
Thanks.
It's a great question, and it is a challenge I think that we're all facing right now.
And I would take my students on field trips, college kids on field trips, but everyone's like, I would take them to the Federal Reserve Bank. My goal though was, and I want to share this with all of you, my goal was they'd have to be on a train and they'd have to sit with each other and they'd have to know who they were and they'd have to connect with each other. And by the end of that 3-hour field trip, they were exchanging phone numbers, they were calling each other, they were forming study groups. And so it's just sometimes, again, it goes back, it's sometimes these little things that we can do, mix it up.
Yeah.
It's okay, it's okay sometimes to be like, look, I'm tired, you're tired. We're only going to do this today and we're going to have some fun with this topic. So think about that as well, so you can kind of re-engage them back and then build them back up.
I've been a teacher in the college and university environment as well as high school, and I can tell you one of the greatest enemies that I've seen in my own life and my own teaching, enemies to being resilient. And I think one of the catalysts for maintaining resilience is checking your expectations. One of the greatest sources of stress and unfulfillment is unmet expectations, where teachers have a tendency to learn their content over years really, really well. And that naturally evolves into high expectations for students to get what the teacher already knows. And there's a natural ability, the teacher thinks, well, this is so easy. But for the students who's learning it for the first time, it may be very, very difficult. So teachers raise their expectations for high behavior, great content assimilation, accommodation, all these things. And then when the student doesn't deliver, or if a group of students doesn't deliver, or a class doesn't deliver, you're deflated, you're defeated. And really what the teacher has to do is have that skill of being able to step back and keep their expectations almost a bit lower than what they think the student can do. Then when you have those times, like Lynn said, when you have students collecting each other's phone numbers and taking the content to the next level, it's all the much better. And it becomes a source of not just meeting expectations, but actually exceeding things and being able to being able to be productive and happy in the work that you've been able to achieve. That doesn't mean have low expectations. It doesn't mean have no expectations, but it means to check those expectations. So what you expect, even if you think that you're the greatest teacher, and you may be, you still got to check those expectations, because there are some things just beyond your control, like COVID. And you know what, if I were going through COVID as a teacher, I think you have to pull back and lean on your structure. So if your principals and your superintendents are telling you that you have to teach in this manner and these are the tools that you have, that's where you have to say, I'm going to do the best that I can. I'm going to try to have high expectations, but I'm also going to check that this may not be as good as what we normally do, and be at peace with that, as opposed to that driving sense of trying to achieve more than you actually can. So that's one thing. Let's go to some other questions. Royetta, you had your hand up. What do you think?
Yes, I just wanted to share that in one of my classes, what I did is I made students co-host when I was doing Zoom. And the night before class, I told them, these are the things that I want you to be sure to bring up as co-host. And I want you to send 3 private messages to these 3 students, or sometimes I said pick 3, but usually at first I signed them, and I said, this part of the lecture, I want you to be sure to chime in. So come up with some questions to share and plan for the class. So that co-hosting now, a couple of times it didn't work too well. Because they weren't really paying attention. But I had one kid, he wanted to be co-host every week. But I said, no, we need to share with others. And I think that really helped a lot. And that also helped me with some technical things, because one of the co-hosts says, well, I understand we can do polls. And so that's when I said, okay, let's do a poll. What are the questions you want to share with the poll? So that kind of energized a bunch of students, and it also helped me to learn some new things about how we could use this technology to the best of our abilities.
Mackenzie had wrote something about social contracts. Mackenzie, there's a lot written there in the chat. Would you be willing to share a little bit more with the group about what you mean and how you're capturing kids' hearts for years, and how amazing it's been, and how it transforms your class? I think that'd be something great for everybody to hear, if you don't mind sharing.
Sure. So Capturing Kids' Heart is it's an organization that's used in schools. It's used with NFL teams. I mean, it's a Fortune 500 companies. I doubt it's called Capturing Kids' Hearts for that setting, but they come in and they do this training, and they talk to you about how to really break down those kinds of social barriers with children. This is when I was teaching high school. And we set social contracts at the beginning of every class, every semester. And it was really just a very simple process. You asked 4 questions. It was, how do you want to be treated by me as the teacher? How do you think I want to be treated by you? How do you want to be treated by others? And how do you want to deal with conflict? And then students had a chance to just write down like words or thoughts. And then we collectively came up with, a set of words that we could all agree on, and then defined those words. So if they said, pay attention, like, what does that mean? That means putting down your phone, or taking out your earbuds, facing forward, not talking, whatever. And if someone was violating that social contract, it was just a really, really easy redirect. And you could say, what are you supposed to be doing? And 90% of the time it solved whatever behavior issue it was. So that was Capturing Kids' Hearts. And then I had a graduate student come in and share this 5-minute free write process. I was teaching English at the time. And it was just this very simple thing we did on Fridays. They had 5 minutes. I could care less whether they wrote their name, whether they wrote the ABCs. Most often, though, the students would just it was kind of like a diary. And the things that they shared were amazing and at times heart-wrenching, but it really broke down a lot of the barriers in class. You know, like if I it's like, oh my God, the student just is not paying attention, like what's going on? You know, oftentimes that during their free write, they would disclose something that they would not have otherwise. And it made it a lot easier to just approach the whole classroom with a little bit more compassion and empathy. So.
Mackenzie, I love that.
That is great.
And Dr. Finley, and we, you know, and I know we all have stories of that, but when you build this community of practice too, it is pretty incredible how they share some things about themselves. And then, you know, and just how empathetic and how much civility they have with each other. And, you know, because they feel it's safe, like you created that safe space for them. But imagine if you could bring that concept to the community, and so the community could actually rally around that as well. You know, it's just, I love that. It's incredible what students will share once you create that safe space and you get rid of all your power structures.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. And it was always confidential. It was never anything that was like read to the class. But it was just it was a really nice opportunity for them to, you know, provide a little bit more insight into what was going on in their lives. And it really changed how I approached students and how I approached the class. And, you know, there were days during COVID where I could see they were burned out and was like, all right, 15 minutes, lights out, like everybody take a nap, like we're done, you know, like no one's learning because everybody's too tired. So I think it's just really reading the room, you know?
You know, so many, I would have gotten in trouble by doing that.
I probably would have too if a principal blocked by, but I did it anyway.
You know, I hate to tell you, but that's exactly what some kids need. Now, but when you're teaching 25 kids in a classroom, it's hard to do that because a few of them just may have stayed up till 2 o'clock in the morning playing video games, and mom and dad didn't do anything, you know, or whoever didn't help them much with that. But yeah, I agree. So that's some great insights. I think some good suggestions. Anything else? So great input, great ideas. Anything else that we can move from? You know, one of the things, well, one of you were talking about the free write idea. You know, one of the things I used to do, if I were a teacher, I would change, is when students would misbehave, I would have a long series of sanctions before I'd ever send them to the office. I rarely sent students to the office. But one thing I'd have them do is write sentences. So if they were talking, I won't talk out loud in the classroom because I respect the court, and they would write that 100 times. Or if they kept doing it, then it would be 500 times. And then if ultimately I'd stop at 1,000, but that would be a lot of papers. But you know what I would do? In fact, now I would change that. I wouldn't make them write repetitious sentences. I'd make them write a paper on why they wouldn't do that, and let them go study it. Let them actually do the free write and make it a lengthy handwritten or typed, you know, pay report on why they won't do that. So it actually internalizes and gets them to study the reasons why they don't want to act up, and require that as opposed to repetitious sentences. The repetitious sentences worked in many regards because it was a very behaviorist strategy. You know, if you do wrong, you get punished. But at the same time, you know, if you're going to use that behaviorist strategy, and sometimes you have to provide that strong structure for students. Sometimes, you know, have something that's going to work better to internalize their own thinking and let them maybe reveal something. You know, I was talking because I was a little loopy because of X, Y, or Z, and I'll make sure that I try to avoid that in the future and get to internalize those things and then support them after that. I think that could be a really great opportunity, and one of those things that I wish I would have had something like this back when I was teaching, so I could hear some of those great ideas. So Mackenzie, thank you for mentioning that. That was enlightening. Anything else from anybody? Jonathan and I taught high school in a very diverse school, primarily immigrants and refugee students for minorities. There were 18 primary languages spoken at the school, and that was from Mackenzie. And Jonathan Walker's on with us today as well. I think he's from Missouri. Nice to have Jonathan. He's off camera right now, but it's good to see him. All right, well, that's all that we have for now. It's about 6 minutes before the hour. Before you leave today, if you don't mind, I'm going to put a link in the chat so you can evaluate this webinar at http://nbea.org/webinar evaluation, and just tell us what you thought. If you follow that link, it will just be a very, very short evaluation on today's session. Tell us what you thought, what you liked about it. I think it asked you to rate on a scale from 1 to 5, with 5 being the best, and what you like and what could have been better. We'd love to hear that from you. So please don't hesitate to do that. We really need those to be to evaluate our time together. Also, too, remember that the Mountain Plains Business Education Association's meeting is in June in Wichita, Kansas. In fact, I will, in the last moments here, I'll try to put a link to that event in our chat. And I'll give any last thoughts to Lynn or Wendy.
Well, it was a pleasure. I'll let Dr. Burks have the last word. It was a pleasure talking with you today, and I think this was great that we get the conversation going. And what I'm impressed with is that, you know, as educators, we know that we have so much to deal with. It's not just the educating, the curriculum. We have so many social issues that we have to deal with, and learning communities is just one of those ways that we're able to bring students together, no matter whether you're in, you know, whatever level of education it is, right up to college and university. So thank you so much for hearing me share my crazy stories today. And it's always a pleasure working with my colleague, Dr. Burks. She's just the ball of fire all the time. So thank you. And I'm looking forward to that, what you promised me for that. You know, I never forget anything free, right? I'll be getting that invitation to that workshop coming up. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm just honored to be able to spend an hour with all of you. I really enjoyed the last 10 minutes where you were all sharing your stories as well. I think we're all collectively concerned about the social emotional health of ourselves and our students, and how much we need community. I mean, even in the horrific events of this week, just the importance of community and getting people connected to people and getting people to show that they care about each other. And, you know, I know we need to get through our learning objectives and, you know, all of those reports and all those tests and things like that. But I think if we can think about little simple ways to kind of build community, you know, it helps us, because our students are you know, it's really empowering to see our students help each other, but I think it's really important for them as well. So I appreciate all of you and everything that you do, and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to spend with Dr. Finley and I.
I'd like to mention, Lynn and Wendy didn't ask me to do this, nor did Daniel, but this webinar has been brought to you today by Yellowdig and NBEA. Yellowdig aims to turn every classroom, boot camp, or organization into an active learning community through its research-driven, hyperactive Yellowdig engagement platform. If you want to know about a system or features of an online platform that focus on those types of inculcating learning community in those types of platforms and some of the methodology, I'd really recommend you go to.
You muted yourself.
Yeah, go figure, how did that happen? Yellowdig CO is the link. So go to that link and you can find more about that product there, but they weren't going to make mention of that because they're here to provide great educational content to us. We appreciate that. At the same time, we want to expose their product and their service as quality providers. They're first class. They've been first class to deal with, and as you can see here, high caliber presenters were provided to us today by them. So thank you, Yellowdig. Daniel, thank you to you and all of our other friends at Yellowdig.
Of course, it was good to be here.
All right. If you have any questions, give us a call. Otherwise, fill out that evaluations. Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend. It's almost here.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. It's so nice to meet you all. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.